to use Bertrand Russell, who was one of the most famous 20th century British philosophers, to use his turn of phrase, he said, we're just an accidental collocation of atoms. Yeah, well, it's interesting that in addition to thinking about Darwinism impacting, racism, which is sort of the main focus of this particular book, in some of my other scholarship, I've also looked at the way that Darwinism impacted other kinds of ideas, like ethics, evolutionary ethics, and such. And so, excuse me, while we may not today ideas about Darwinian racism may be fringe ideas among white nationalists and such. There's other more mainstream ideas about Darwinism that does end up devaluing human life in other ways. And so in my book, From Darwin to Hitler, where I look at the early phases of Darwinian thinking about eugenics and euthanasia and abortion and other kinds of issues that have to do with life and death, the Nazis were going to use those ideas to implement their euthanasia, so-called euthanasia program, their T4 program that killed 200,000 Germans with disabilities. Today we may be opposed to racism as the intellectual elites anyway in our society, and as a culture we may be pushing away from racism in a lot of ways. But there's other ways that we allow Darwinism to devalue human life too, because if we are simply the chance product of eons of development, then many Darwinists themselves today readily admit, and this is not just something I'm throwing at them, it's something that they admit. People like Jerry Coyne, evolutionary biologist at the University of Chicago, he's retired. People like Richard Dawkins, evolutionary biologist, of course, one of the most famous atheists in the world today. They admit that if we are just a product of evolutionary processes that didn't have us in mind, then human life has no meaning. It has no purpose. There was no goal to bring us about. And so there's no basic value of humans. We're just an accident. To use Bertrand Russell, who was one of the most famous 20th century British philosophers, to use his turn of phrase, he said, we're just an accidental collocation of atoms. That's all we are. And so we may not be faced with exactly the same situation as, say, looking at, say, Hitler's racism or something, and we may be intensely anti-fascist, anti-Nazi and such, but yet there are other ways that we've devalued human life to bring us into a society where we have easy acceptance today among intellectual elites of abortion and infanticide and euthanasia and other issues. So I think there's different ways that we've allowed these devaluing of human life things to creep in through this, through Darwinian ideology.